Hi there, I'm Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com, and this is my Smart American Accent Training. Welcome to our Friday live question and answer class, where we talk about the American accent, American English pronunciation, and everything you need to know to improve your communication in both your professional and your personal communication in American English. So thank you for everyone for being here today, and I will be taking your questions throughout the class. I want to do a slightly different format today and talk to you a little bit about a technique that I've used in some of my local workshops. And this is some of the material I'll be covering tomorrow here in the Bellevue area. So if you're here in Seattle and you have some time tomorrow morning, I'll be teaching this class at 11 o'clock, and you can find details and RSVP for that class on my website, speechmodification.com. But for those of you who are watching from all over around the world and who can't come to a class in Bellevue, I thought I'd give you some of the same information today that we'll be covering in that class. Again, you can certainly ask questions regarding other aspects of pronunciation. I'm happy to stop and answer those as well, and ask questions about what I'm talking about today. So the topic for today, or the theme for today, is change 10 words to change your speech by 90%. Now, of course, that's a little bit extreme. Of course, there's more than 10 words in your speech that you will want to correct and change your patterns on. But the concept is that if you learn about the patterns that you have on some basic words in English, these patterns tend to carry across everything that you're doing, all of the words with similar sounds in English. And so as you've seen in our classes, we often will be working on the R sounds or the TH sounds or the vowels to help you across all of the things that you have to say. We've also lately been talking about how we make mistakes on some fairly basic everyday words because of the way they're spelled. So we may think that the word should have a different pronunciation than it does. And so this training and this class will look at those words and those patterns and give you a preview of many of the free resources you find here on YouTube, free resources on speechmodification.com, as well as classes, online classes and training that you can take to help you. Okay, so let's take a look, and we're going to talk about how this works. So it seems like an outrageous claim, right? Change 10 words, change your speech by 90%. But the bulk of your speech is made up of core words. So even though you have a big vocabulary, thousands and thousands of words, about 80% of what you say is about 1,000 words or less. So it's those little words like it, was, use, goes, etc. They make up the bulk of our sentences. And so if we can change the patterns on those words, it's going to have a big effect on our overall speech. Also, the patterns that we have are consistent across words, as I was just saying. If you have a tendency, for example, to make a stopped sound for the TH sound, so you say the word the more like duh, you're going to be doing that on all of the words that have the TH sounds. And so if you can correct the pattern on the one word, that will help you with the other words that have that same pattern. So my SMART training, as you know, really does focus in on some of these quick fixes, things that you can do to change the patterns, and then also teaching you the steps to move those new patterns into habits, to form new speech habits with the American accent, with the correct pronunciation, so you can be clearly understood in English. If you fix one word, that will help you with all of the other words that have the same pattern. So for example, I like to talk about the word the. It's the most commonly used word in English, and I have a lot of videos about this. People have struggles with this word. Even though there are three letters in this word, there are actually only two sounds. So the TH, as you know, makes one sound, th, and the letter E in the word the makes the vowel schwa, the sound. Even though there's only two sounds, we have multiple errors that can happen for this word. So the first error is often with the TH sound. As you know, it is a challenging sound to make in English. And for many non-native speakers, their TH ends up sounding more like a D, so the would sound like duh, or like a Z, the would sound like z. The second error is that oftentimes people will pronounce this word as the instead of the. And as I've said in other classes, we do say the in some contexts when the next word starts with a vowel or we're stressing on that word. But the majority of the time, we should be saying the with the vowel rather than the. It's not something that makes it difficult to understand your speech, but it's very noticeable as the most common word in English. If you're always saying it as the, it makes your speech sound different than others, and perhaps it's distracting. So when you have a pronunciation difference in your speech, people may be distracted by that. Maybe then they miss the next thing that you said. So even though they could understand the for the, it is a great idea to fix it. It also will help you when you fix the th on the word the. Many of these common words also have the th sound. All of these do. This, their, them, they. Of the top 200 words in English, about 20 of them have a th sound. So you can imagine that we use many ths as we're speaking. It'll also help you with the voiceless th sound in sounds like think and with and both. And so the patterns that you learn just on the single word the can help you on many of the common words and a large percentage of your speech. If you can correct the error pattern on the schwa vowel, that's going to help you on many other places where you might accidentally be saying the spelled vowel rather than the sound schwa. So on words like above, across, today, and tomorrow, those all have the sound as well. Let's take a look at another common word, the word no. Here we have 2 letters, but actually in American English, 3 sounds. So that's kind of surprising to many people. We, for the O in American English, we glide from the O to the vowel. So we hold our O and we close into the O. For many people, the error is that they will say just one sound for no, O, just the O. And the issue here is that when I say no with a clear O and not the American O, it can sound to the American listener like I'm upset, or I don't want to be bothered, or I'm being rude, just no. And so you may be just having a pronunciation difference. You're using the O sound from your native language rather than the American O. But the American listener thinks, oh, what's wrong? He just said no. What did I do wrong? And so your accent affects more than just being understood and just pronunciation. It can also affect how you're perceived. And you want to be aware of the differences in your speech and how they might be interpreted by your listener. So no is a good example for that. And so when I'm talking about the O from your native language, here's an example of in Spanish, the O is just one sound O, but in English, it's O gliding from the one vowel to the second vowel. So this is just talking about vowel sounds in your native language versus American English. The quick fix for this error pattern is simply to hold your O longer. You don't need to know the details about what the 2 vowels are, how your mouth is positioned. If you just hold your no longer, it'll sound more American. People won't think you're angry or upset or impatient, and you'll have that American sound. It's a really easy and quick fix for the O. If you can correct that in that word no, it will help you with other common words with the word O as well. So let's look at our next word. Our next word is the word says. We've actually been talking about this the last few weeks. And even though there are 4 letters, there are 3 sounds in this word. One of the errors that can happen is that people will accidentally say the A vowel. This may be happening because in your language you don't have an and you use an A instead. Or it may be happening because you see the word says and it looks like the word say, and you're using the spelling to tell you to say says instead of says. If you can correct this pattern for this vowel with the strange spelling, it's going to help you with other words with vowel both all of the words that have that vowel, and then especially words like any and again, where it's not spelled with an E, and so you may think that it has a different vowel sound. The second error that can happen on the word says is that we see the letter S and we say it as an S, says, instead of says. So this is a common pattern on many words that end with the letter S, but they actually say the letter Z. We talk about this often in class as well. We have words like was, those, please, does. The majority of the time, if a word ends with the letter S or the letters SE, most of the time it will say a Z sound rather than an S sound. There are some words, of course, that also say S, but the tendency is that for those words, you may be either thinking it's supposed to be an S sound and then saying an S sound, or you may have an accent pattern called devoicing, which means at the ends of words, voice sounds like Z, Z, or my voice is on, end up sounding more like an S, where my voice is off. So if you can correct that error on the final Z, that's going to help you on many, many common words like was, is, eyes, goes, does, etc. Again, we're talking about a simple pattern, so one small thing to correct on one word, and it represents something that can help you across all of your speech on common words on the bulk of what you're saying. So we're probably up to a pretty high percentage now. Of course, I can't just change the word says and then automatically have all of these other words correct as well. But if you follow the training pattern, the training ideas and suggestions that I make in these classes, as well as on speechmodification.com, you'll begin to hear and notice these patterns, which is the first step, and then you'll be able to begin to produce them and change them in your speech, which is typically very helpful. So you might be saying, oh my goodness, help, I haven't noticed these issues before. I'm already overwhelmed. The most common word in English, I make an error. I didn't know that all these vowels were different. I didn't know that the S should say Z. Or maybe I knew some of those, but I still feel overwhelmed or don't know where to begin. Don't panic. We have there are many, many resources you can use for learning about pronunciation and knowing how to correct these patterns. One of the recommendations I make is using online dictionaries. I often show you the Oxford Learner's Dictionary in class. And in particular, it's very useful to learn the symbols in this. So for example, if I'm wanting to know whether a word says an S or a Z, I can look at, for example, the word house and the word houses, and I can see that in the word house or in the word houses, my S's turn to Z sounds. And I can tell because in the symbols, we use a Z every time it says Z and an S every time it says S. And also with the online dictionary, I can listen and begin to develop my ear for noticing those differences as well. Once you have learned about a pattern, you'll find that when you're listening to Americans around you or listening to your own speech, you'll notice the differences and you'll be able to hear that there is a Z there when before perhaps you didn't notice or your ear just thought of an S because of the S spelling. It's also very helpful for vowel sounds. So for example, in the word say, I can see the American A, two sounds just like O, A versus and saying versus in the word says, here's my symbol for the red tent vowel, the sound. And I can listen to say and listen to says and begin to develop my ear to notice that word as I'm speaking and as I'm listening. You'll also find many, many free resources on speechmodification.com. And I know a lot of you viewers are already using those tools with the free practice. I usually show you at least 1 or 2 lessons in every class so that you can get a feel for how to navigate on the website and how to find what you're looking for. Anytime you're looking for information, you can use the search tools on speech modification or on YouTube. Type in your word, type in your sound that you're looking for, and the lessons and videos related will come up. Or if you can't find it that way, I'm always happy to answer any comments or questions in class or on my videos. I always do go through and find those and direct you to where you can find the resources and the answers to your questions. Many times the questions that you ask really help me know what topics to cover in class and what videos to make. So I very much appreciate your comments and questions. And I often have the answers ready for you already in a video, but if I didn't have that, then I might make something new to help you with that as well. So we talked about the word says and the errors you might have, that the Z might be devoiced, but we really didn't talk about how to correct that error. So the quick fix for being able to say your Z sounds at the ends of words is to use linking. In phrases like was it, does it, and use it, I don't make a break between words. I link words in speech. If I broke after every word, my speech would sound very choppy. Instead, we link words together, and that can actually help you and be an advantage when it comes to this error pattern called devoicing. So for example, when I say the words was I, it sounds more like was I, was I. My voice stays on from the vowel in was to the vowel in I, was I. And you already do this naturally. So many of you may have some small issues with devoicing, and it's easier to say two words and to say sentences than it is just to say was by itself with that Z sound. So does it sounds like does it. Is it sounds like is it. And this happens in phrases as well. Use a plate. It goes in here. You'll notice that I rewrite these words, and I often do this in class as well, with the Z sound to help my brain notice and remember to leave my voice on and use the Z sound rather than an S. So using these tricks to help overcome the habits. When I see the word was, my mouth wants to do the pronunciation stored in my brain, which might be more like was. When I see this was it with two Z's and an IT, I've never seen that before. My brain is going to see that Z and say, okay, was it, and turn my voice on for that Z sound. This can help you with other voice consonants at the end as well. And we do linking with these as well. So for those of you who can come to class tomorrow, we'll be doing some partner practice and trying that with one another. For today, we're going to take a look at another common word and a common error you might have, which is on the word of. This one is terrible. We spell it O-F, but we don't say an O sound or an F sound in this word. We actually use a U sound, and a V sound, v, so it should sound like of. So the first error pattern is that that V sound can sound more like an F. Oftentimes it's because of the spelling. Many people have an error on this word. They don't necessarily have an error on other V sounds, but for many people, the V at the ends of words can be devoiced, and this will help. This fix can help you with other words that end with V. So the quick fix is, again, to use linking. It's easier to say of it, of any, of a, leave my voice on and make that V sound between those two words. The other error is that there's not an O sound in this word. It sounds like vowel schwa, the sound. And to correct that, pairing vowels with the anchor vowels that we often look at in class. The anchor vowel for vowel schwa is, or the anchor phrase is such fun. So I can try phrases that will help me connect those two. So I can think of the sun, of fun, and try to make my vowel the same across those words. Such fun, of. I can also rewrite of with a U and a V, and that might help my brain make the new sounds in that word. If I can correct the patterns on the word of, then I can also correct them in words like give, leave, love, have, extremely common, very useful words. And if I can correct the vowel schwa, just like we did in the word the, it's going to help me on other places where that spelling doesn't really match. So words like some, money, was, love. I might be trying to pronounce the vowel that I see rather than pronouncing that sound that is in those words. So we talked about the at the start of class, the most common word, and that our errors are on the TH and the vowel. And here's some resources and help for you for correcting this word. So first of all, I have a free ebook, which you can get on speechmodification.com, that walks you through exactly how to correct your TH and exactly how to correct the vowel and put those together in the word the. And then it also gives you links to many of the resources here on YouTube as well as on my website, so you can begin to start using those to help you. And you can also go through the steps of changing your speech. So that's what we'll talk about next. One of the quick fixes for the vowels, of course, is using the anchors. So I can try phrases like the fun, the sun, the one, and keep that vowel consistent across the two. For the error where my TH might sound more like a D or a Z, it's a slightly less quick fix. I have to learn to create that new error pattern or that new sound. So there's two things. I need my tongue in the correct position, and I need airflow. I need that sound to continue. For you, many of you have this basic sound when you're able to say it when you say the word the, but then you go to speak and you notice that the old pattern comes out, the old habit. It's very hard to use your new TH when you're talking, when you're giving a presentation, when you're on the phone, when you're talking at work. And so I always recommend doing some repeated phrase practice for that. So one of the steps there is to just try labeling things around you. You can say the pen, the pencil, the computer, the office, the meeting, and get a lot of repetition of that new pattern. You can also choose a category and begin to label, for example, animals, the dog, the cat, etc. And then later on, you want to try using common combinations of words like in the and on the, and doing repeated phrase practice with that as well. So that is what I would suggest for the word the. We'll quickly go over a few additional words. I know I'm covering a lot today. I want to give you kind of an overview and a feel for different resources and different patterns. So another error pattern that we often see is on the word today. The error is that in this word, people will often be pronouncing it as today rather than today. So we see that the first vowel in this word is vowel schwa. It sounds like a. And the quick fix for that is to think of the syllables and think about lengthening on day and shortening and being light on the syllable for to. So saying today rather than today. You can see videos about this pattern and others, of course, on speechmodification.com. And this leads us to some more complex speech, which is in connected speech, when I use the word to, I don't say it like to. I also reduce it to ta in phrases. So I don't say, I need to talk to you. I'll say, I need to talk to you. That oo becomes an I need to talk. I need to listen. I need to work. You can use repeated phrase practice to help you with this as well, just like I just did, using I need to, I want to, and changing your to a ta. You can also try practicing with just verbs, to talk, to listen, to go, or with phrases to the store, to the library, to the meeting, to really begin to incorporate that habit. Again, if you say to the meeting, to the store, that's clear, that's correct, but it's different than how Americans speak, and it will stand out and be noticeable. It really helps our fluency to do these reductions and this linking, and that's part of more advanced training. And so you can find more help with that on my Real Talk course and my Real Talk playlist here on Speech Modification YouTube channel. We also often talk about linking and reduced sounds in our Friday classes, and it's a good place to learn about what happens in connected speech and how it's different from written language. Okay, let's look at the word interest. And the error pattern that I see here is that often people will say this word with 3 syllables rather than 2. It looks like it should be interest, and we actually pronounce it interest with 2 syllables. So we don't say this middle E, we just say interest. If I can correct that, that will help me with many other words. For example, vegetable, I will often hear vegetable instead of vegetable. Or several, I'll hear several rather than several. Our spellings definitely leads us astray, both with vowels and with syllables. And you can find videos on these and other words and a lesson about places where we have extra syllables on speechmodification.com. Another thing we talk about often is syllable stress. And so an example of this is the word myself, where we should stress the second syllable. So it's short, long, myself. I'll often hear people stress the first syllable, myself, instead of myself. The quick fix for that is learning to stretch and lengthen on the second syllable. And this can really help you with other words and with sentences for intonation. Using my Say This, Not That playlist can help you with patterns like this. And also the online dictionary can teach you about syllable stress. I have a series of intonation videos that teach you about which syllable is stressed in a word and how to help with that. I'm going to pause for a moment because I see we have a question about how to pronounce the word motto. And this is kind of like we were talking about, and something I'll talk about in just a moment. I'm going to be talking about the word water. And motto is a good example of how Americans won't really say those T's in motto as a T sound. I don't say motto with a puff of air, motto. That sounds more British or Indian English. In American English, I will do these T's more as a flap T, which sounds like a light D. So it sounds kind of like motto, motto. Now, I'm not saying a strong, hard, closed D, motto. It's light. I just touch up and release, motto. The other thing is that we have, even though we have two letter O's, this first O says ah, ma, motto. And my second O says those two vowels O in American English, the diphthong O. So thinking of it as being motto, making sure you're lengthening on your last O and you're saying more of an ah with that flap T in the middle is how you pronounce that word. Thank you for the question. That's very helpful. And it does bring to mind that the word water is one that many people struggle with for a number of reasons. And if you have been working on words like water, it will help you when you're trying to pronounce words like motto. So any of the patterns that you learn, you can learn other words and other places where we use those patterns in American English to correct your pronunciation and your accent. Let's take a look at that word water. Many people struggle with this. And first of all, one of the errors that we have is on the R. You're welcome. One of the errors we have is on using something other than the American R. So for many dialects of English, when R comes at the middle or in the ends of words, those speakers of English don't use the tight back American R. They would say it more like wada or paper or bird, where they're using not the back R. They might also use a front R and roll it, water, water, or for example, a word like very, they would use that flapped R. So to learn to correct your American R, I have a number of videos to help you, and this is something we spend many times, we cover many times in class because the American R is a challenging sound. Looking at the pattern of not using a tight enough R, American R, better, British R, better. American R, never, British, never. American R, either, British, either. So we work on, the quick fix is not so quick for this one. You have to work on developing that American R. But the information that's useful is that whenever we have an R in English, it is always going to be the tight back American R. We never use just a vowel sound. And we have either the R at the start or the So we're either starting with R and going out to a vowel, or starting with a vowel and going back to that tight American R. This is definitely an important error pattern to correct because there are so many R's in English and has a big effect on people being able to understand you. It's very noticeable in your speech. So I have a full playlist for American R, and American R is covered in all of my lessons, many of my lessons on my website and all of my online courses. So that's a great way to get some help and specifics on the American R. And it's also something that I teach my clients one-to-one and give them tips and practice materials and help to create that American R in their speech. How about the T? So I was talking about this just a moment ago when we had the question about the word motto. Americans don't say the aspirated T. They don't say water. They don't use their T with a puff of air. What they use is called a flap T. And so the tongue position is the same, but with the T that we use at the start of words with a puff of air, like talk and take, I tap up, I hold the air, and then that puff of air releases. Versus with the flap T that I use in the middle of words like water, my tongue touches up to the same spot, but my voice is on and there's no release of air. So it doesn't, the voice sound releases, there's no puff of air. So it sounds like water, water, rather than water with a puff of air. When I can correct that in the word water, It's going to help me with many other common words like little, city, Saturday, Seattle. And the quick fix is just to think of it as a D, to try to do a nice light D. You don't have to worry too much about the details of the flap T. If you're interested in those, of course, I have a lot of videos helping you develop that flap T and showing you which words have the flap T versus another kind of T sound in the middle or the end. It's also going to help you in your fluency in connected speech, because when we link the T sounds, we often use this flap T as well. When the next word starts with a vowel and the first word ends with a T, I use a flap to connect them. So I don't say hot out, I say hot out. I don't say not in, I say not in. I don't say ate it, I say ate it, ate it. You can find more help for that on my linking videos and also on my American T videos. And we have another question, which is, how would you pronounce let's get carry out? Let's get carry out. So let's, I'm going to say both my T and my S. There's voiceless sounds. Let's get carry out. So if I'm breaking it up, I'm saying those T's. When I say it together, let's get carry out. Let's get carry out. I have a tendency to use a stopped T here. So I don't say get. I go up to make the T, get, and then I don't release it. I just release right into the k sound of carry out. Let's get carry out. So there's no release of air after the T. And I also use a stop T on this one. Let's get carry out. I tend to go up, make that T position with my tongue and not release the air. I can say let's get carry out and put that small T on, but Americans will often, when a word ends with a T or a stopped sound like this, they will make a stopped, unreleased stop. If you have other questions about the vowels or other pronunciation there, let me know, but we were just talking about T's, so I'm thinking you're asking about that. And yeah, here in Seattle, I think people often will say takeout. Let's get takeout instead of carry out, but carry out is probably used in other places as well. Great question, thank you. Okay, I think we have one more word of our 10 to look at, and then we need to wrap up because we're going long today. So let's look at the word it's. This is something that has a couple of errors. So first of all, your vowel I may sound more like an E. And to correct that, using minimal pairs like it versus eat, is versus ease, and learning to make that lax I vowel rather than the tense E vowel can help you. And you can learn about that in my website, as I've talked about, and using my 5x5 challenge videos is a great place for that. And the other error that I often hear is that people very frequently won't use its. They might use it is. Or just like we had in our example for let's, Americans will always use a contraction, almost always, unless they're going to be stressing, for example, it is. If they're trying to highlight that word is, then they'll use both. Otherwise, they're always going to say, it's raining, it's terrible traffic today, it's busy at the store, etc. So the quick fix for this one is to start to use these contractions. And when you begin to use its, it can help you with other contractions we commonly often use, like isn't, I'm, didn't, we've, and he'll. You can learn about contractions in my contractions video, but it's one of those little details that, again, for you more advanced speakers, it's correct and grammatically to say it is, but it's not as fluent and it doesn't sound American, and it will be one of the small details in your speech that stands out as being a non-native speaker rather than a native speaker. It gives you a more fluent sound. Okay, so other resources you guys know about from coming to class, come to our live class on Fridays. Check out the American Accent 6-week class on speech modification. That's a subscription, $5 a month, that walks you through the steps of changing your speech, talks about these patterns and many others. You can come to my free workshop tomorrow if you're here in the Seattle area. It will be in Bellevue tomorrow, Saturday at 11 o'clock. So I hope I can see some of you there. And For those of you who haven't, please subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to be notified when we're live, you can click on notifications and YouTube will let you know. And that way YouTube knows that this is content that's interesting for people. And also feel free to leave comments, questions on this video or any videos. I will get back to you with answers and share resources to address your question. So we have one more question. How to pronounce repository. Is it ri or re, repository? So the rule generally is words that have an unstressed first syllable and are spelled with an E, like between or repository, is that we use the I sound, repository. However, if you say repository with the E, it mostly will sound correct. The most important thing is to stress the second syllable pause and have that be long, and have your first syllable be short and unstressed. The most correct way to do it is repository, and to go use vowel I on that. But again, that's a pretty, the most important thing is to stress the correct syllable and be light on the first syllable. That's a great question. Thank you. Okay, we went through quite a lot today very quickly. In the coming weeks, we'll talk about these same patterns, perhaps one at a time, with more detail and more help for walking through the steps of changing your speech for those patterns. But I like to present these 10 words to give you a good global picture at what's going on for many of you on the many accent patterns in your speech. It can be really useful to sort of see and have your eyes opened on these common words for the ways that you can change them and have a big effect on your speech. So thank you so much for those of you who attended today's class. I'm sorry it was more talking and fewer questions. Next week, we'll go back to our question and answer format where there's more room for you to ask questions regarding pronunciation, and we'll talk about a little less content and more of what you would like to hear about. So please do ask questions in the comments if you're watching this as a replay or after the class finishes, and I will make sure to answer them all for you. Thank you so much for being here today, and I hope to see some of you tomorrow. This was a great class to have you at, and I want to sign off for now. I'm Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com. Remember, if you want to sound American, you can do it. speechmodification.com.